All right, let's talk a little bit about World War II. World War II, and where did this start? How do we get here? World War II is very much connected to World War One. Germany, remember, Germany absolutely got destroyed in the treaty after World War One. They had to pay reparations to all these European countries, repair Europe that was destroyed. They took all the blame for World War One. They were stripped of their military, so they were kind of like this toothless tiger, no way to defend themselves. They lost territory. They were humiliated. I mean, they were not really allowed in the negotiations for the treaty. It was kind of forced upon them. They were really given the entire blame by the world for World War One. This does not set well with Germany. It's going to cause major problems. Now, the Great Depression happens before World War II, but the fact that they owe all this money just crushes the German economy. They have people out of work, hungry. Again, so they are extremely resentful of the fact that the world has really kind of put these restrictions on them and just not happy. And this really leads them into World War II. This is kind of where some of those seeds were kind of planted. The other side, the side that doesn't get talked about nearly as much, is Japan. Japan really was eyeing an empire. So this kind of starts in the imperialism age. Remember the Russo-Japanese War in 1904. That was an end was negotiated by Theodore Roosevelt, partly because he didn't really trust Russia and he didn't trust Japan. And he really didn't want to see any one of them get to this point of being so big that they couldn't be controlled. So he negotiates an end to the Russo-Japanese War, and it creates a little bit of mistrust among all those kind of that were there. Kind of a thing to note is during this time period, China was absolutely not the country that we know today. They were, of all the industrialized country, they industrialized far later than everybody else. During the early 1900s, they really weren't industrialized. They were completely isolated from the world. All they wanted to do was concentrate on what they were doing within their borders. So a lot of countries saw China as like, wow, they got a lot of resources, a lot of land. Wow, that is our empire right there. Japan was one of those countries. They're like, wow, they could be defeated so easily. Look at, like, if we could add China to our island nation, we would be huge. We would be unstoppable. That's kind of what they're thinking. Okay, so TR ends the Russo-Japanese War, kind of negotiates an end at that Treaty of Portsmouth. So he thinks he's kind of dodged a little bit of a bullet. Japan doesn't overtake China. And remember, this is kind of what leads that open door policy that we're really pushing in China, that everybody could fairly trade with China, because we don't want anybody to take China, for fear that obviously China plus whatever the country is would become this huge power. So we didn't want that to be the case. The other thing that kind of creeps up is this idea of the gentleman's agreement. And this is such a weird story, I almost don't think it's true. Japan gets word that the San Francisco School Board, you heard right, the school board would not let Japanese Americans, students, go to school in San Francisco public schools. So they get word of this, and this greatly annoys them. So Theodore Roosevelt calls people, all the parties to Washington, and kind of negotiates this gentleman's agreement. So he tells the San Francisco School Board, the San Francisco government, like, what are you doing to me? Like, because you won't let Japanese American kids, you're creating this gigantic problem for me. Let the kids go to school. So they hammer out an agreement where the Japanese American kids are allowed to go to the schools in San Francisco, and the United States restricts immigration from Japan. So everybody kind of walks away from this idea of the gentleman's agreement with a lot of distrust. Obviously, the U.S. already distrusts Japan, thinking they're trying to form this gigantic empire, which they were. And obviously, they don't have much, they want to restrict immigration, so they don't think too highly of Japan or the Japanese that are coming over here. Japan has a mistrust of us because they know that we don't think much of them, and so there's this animosity building between Japan and the United States. Don't really trust each other. Now, the Soviet Union, if you remember right, Russia bows out of World War I because they are they are in the midst of the Civil War and they are overtaken by the communists. They become the Soviet Union. Okay, the United States, we don't trust the communists, but before World War II, we do recognize the Soviet Union because we'd like them to take control, to have another power in the region to make sure Japan isn't going crazy. So we do recognize them. That's our thought. Now, the U.S. is truly neutral in World War II. Like, our complete idea is we want to be neutral. We passed this idea of the Neutrality Act in 1935, where we cannot sell like ammunition to countries that are involved in war. Now, we modify this process as we go. So as Germany kind of revs up, we kind of realize they're an issue. So we come up with a new policy, kind of scrapping complete neutrality, but we're trying to really make sure we're kind of staying out of this. We come up with this idea of cash and carry. So we don't want to be responsible. If you can pay us in cash, we're not going to show you any favors. So if you can pay us in cash and also come pick the stuff up, we're not going to ship it to you. You're going to pay us cash and take it away. So we're not going to put ourselves in any risk. You can go ahead and we can sell you arms and that sort of thing. As they further go and as people start falling out of the war and Great Britain's kind of left alone, the United States comes up with this Lend-Lease Act. Like, hey, we'll just loan you guns and you can kind of lease them and return them when we're done. Like, because everybody was low on money and the United States, like, we really don't want to go to war, but we're going to give you everything you have to win. We want you to win, but we really don't want to go ourselves. So we kind of slowly start gradually moving. And obviously after Lend-Lease, we're going to get drug into this thing, and that's going to happen. All right, how we get there, how we get to war. Benito Mussolini comes to power in Italy. That is not a good thing. Brings in fascism, and Adolf Hitler comes to power in Germany. Definitely not a good thing. He is not a great character by any means. So these two come to power, and they become very friendly, which is not a great thing. They also became very friendly with Japan, and eventually form an alliance between the three of them. Not a great thing for the rest of the world. Now Hitler starts becoming very aggressive during this time period. Now Germany, right here, kind of notice after World War I. Remember, they lost a lot of land, a lot of their military is very weak. Hitler builds their military up. Their economy's bad. Hitler promises jobs to get Germans on board. Now, not all Germans were on board, but to get enough to take over power. So he really focuses on what's called the Sudetenland. That's right, kind of in here. Czechoslovakia had a lot of Germans that lived there. He lost it during World War I. Basically says, I'm going to go take that. So this idea of appeasement was floated that Europe didn't want to get back. They didn't want to go back to war. France and Great Britain, like, they're just building back up after World War I. It's expensive. It's deadly. They don't really want to do it. So they're like, well, oh, okay, we got it. As long as you stop there, we're okay. So they have that's the plan of appeasement that comes up with at this peace conference in Munich. It's called the Munich Pact. So Germany goes and they take the Sudetenland. 6 months later, they take the rest of Czechoslovakia. And everybody's like, oh, great, here we go. Germany makes no bones about the fact that they want to take over Poland. And boom, they do. Now, they also know they don't necessarily want to mess with this. Soviet Union's very big on their Eastern Front. So they kind of cut a deal with the Soviet Union because the Soviet Union feels like part of Poland is theirs. So they cut a deal that when they signed a non-aggression pact with the Soviet Union, basically saying, hey, if you don't come after us, you can have part of Poland that you feel like is yours. And the Soviet Union says, that sounds like a good idea. We'll do that. So after that happens, Germany just starts with this blitzkrieg, and that's what they call it, lightning warfare, where they attack all of these different places. Obviously, they go to Poland. That takes them about 3 weeks before that happens. They go to Finland, which I think I have cut out of the shot, but that's okay. And that, that doesn't take very long. Eventually, they go over here to Belgium. They go up here. So they're kind of attacking all the way, and eventually they're going to get to France, and they attack France in 1940, and it takes them about 6 weeks to eliminate France from the war. So as soon as basically France enters, France kind of leaves. So that's no good. So they're out pretty quickly. which means kind of Great Britain stands alone. And at this point, we're like, we know there's trouble brewing, and we really want Great Britain to win. We're neutral in name only. We want Britain to win. So again, that's when we come up with this idea of Lend-Lease. Like, here's guns. Like, hopefully defend yourself. And Great Britain is just getting pounded. They're getting aerated and just taking a beating at the hands of the Germans. And for some unbeknownst reason, Germany decides to invade the Soviet Union in June of 1941, thinking that, like, hey, this is pretty easy. Let's go get the Soviet Union. I think we can take them. So they invade the Soviet Union in 1941. Now, at this time, like, Franklin Roosevelt and Winston Churchill from Great Britain are talking, like, every day. Like, you know, Franklin Roosevelt's giving advice. They finally meet each other. They come up with what's called the Atlantic Charter, where they come up with the 4 freedoms, like freedom of worship and freedom from want and freedom against fear and freedom of speech. And really, this is kind of like, hey, this is what binds us together. And they're really not neutral. The United States is just trying their best to stay out of it. Obviously, they would lose that battle. In the meantime, they're also kind of negotiating with Japan, saying, hey, Japan, if you just leave China, you just kind of stop doing what you're doing, like, we can kind of not worry about it. Japan says no, and Japan also takes it one step farther, and they attack Pearl Harbor, which is located in Hawaii, in December 7, 1941, which, again, we just can't ignore, so that drags us into the war. We declare war against Japan a few days later. A few days after that, Germany's like, oh, you declared war on one of our allies, we're going to declare war on you, and now we're in. Now, what we do, the Allies do a really nice job of coordinating their effort, planning out what's going on. The Axis powers, Japan, Italy, Germany, really don't. They're kind of all, they're on the same side, but they're doing their own thing, kind of build their own empires. That's going to help us greatly. So we coordinate very well, even though, like, a lot of countries don't trust each other. Britain and the United States do not trust the Soviet Union. It is a weird partnership, but they make it work. It's kind of what happens. Now, the idea is, and the United States and Great Britain are on the same page. They want to defeat Germany first. Everybody's on the same page with that, truth be told. Now, the U.S. and Great Britain feel like it's best to engage them in Africa, that they can drive them out of Africa, they can get some victories and get some momentum. The Soviet Union's like, heck no, like, come and help us. Like, we're fighting for our lives on the Eastern Front. I need backup. And the United States and Great Britain don't really give them backup. The Soviet Union will hold a grudge of this for a long time. Like, this does not make them happy. They repeatedly ask for help, and the United States and Great Britain are like, keep fighting, you're doing a great job. We're going to go at it a different way, for sure. So the U.S. starts in Africa. Eventually they drive, like, the Germans out of Africa. They drive Italy out of the war, so they take over parts of, like, Sicily, and basically get Italy to kind of drop out so we can focus on the Germans. And June 6, 1944 is D-Day. So that is when we attack at Omaha Beach right there. Coordinated airstrike, ground strike. And we really kind of make the Germans think we were going to go up here, a place called Colossus, but we don't. We fool them and we hit them right down here. So we have all of these different coordinated airstrikes and storm the beach and eventually take the beach and then push forward, push the Germans into France, out of France. For the rest of the summer, we keep fighting and push them out of France. Eventually, by mid-September, we push them out of Belgium. And then we push into Germany. And Germany makes their last stand at what's called the Battle of the Bulge. And we crack the bulge. So basically defeat the Germans. Now we have to focus on Japan. And there's a strategy to beat the Japanese. It's called island hopping. And basically it's like we take all these little islands and eventually get to the big island of Japan. And that's kind of what happens. Now, to defeat the Japanese, we use the atomic bomb. We drop a bomb on Hiroshima, drop a bomb on Nagasaki, and eventually Japan's like, we've had enough, no more. That was good, we got it. And then they kind of do that. Now, the peace. Peace is very simple. We divide up Germany, so that France, Great Britain, the United States, and Russia is occupying Germany and Berlin, and Germany also has to